for the next year, uh, leading up through November, and probably likely exceeding uh, November, exceeding the time of November, it'll probably stretch out into November and December, and perhaps even January of the next year. That would be 2025. Things are going to get really annoyingly, brutally crazy. And here's my advice, all right, with this presidential election. There are a couple prongs to my advice. I don't often offer advice unsolicited. I don't like unsolicited advice from others, and I normally don't offer it unsolicitedly to others. But maybe instead of calling this advice, it's more going to be, I'm going to be detailing my game plan of how to deal with everything, and recommending it to everybody else. So when I speak of it as advice, it's what I am going to be putting into effect, and it's what I advise others put into effect for themselves. And it's very simple. It's very simple at its essence. And I've titled this video, "Don't Look at It, Marion," because that's a line from a famous scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I recorded a video about that scene earlier, and it's an underrated line, because it's got so much potential meaning. What's great about the scene is that it's never exactly explained, and it's always when Indiana Jones speaks this line to Marion, he's basically going on a gut feeling. He's going on his hunch, which is that what's about to happen is not fit for eyes to see, and they should close their eyes and refuse to see it, and thus refuse to be sullied in it, and thus avoid their own destruction, which is what ends up happening to everybody else in that scene, which I'm not going to go into detail again here, but I, again, recorded a video about it earlier that you can go back and watch if you're interested, where I break it all down. It doesn't seem like a scene that gets discussed very much, but the more I think about it, the more significant it becomes, the more relevant it becomes. Don't look at it. Don't look at what they're saying about this election, this presidential election, this 2024 apocalypse. Already they're building it up like it's the apocalypse. It's the apocalypse. And by the way, I have like I said earlier, there are two prongs to my advice here, and one of them is going to be nakedly self-interested, but still honest, and still not disingenuous. But the first thing that I'm saying I'm speaking, of what I'm going to do. So in that sense, it's in what I believe to be my self-interest, and it's what I believe will be in your self-interest as well. Don't look at it. I think this entire 2024 election is going to be similar to the Nazis opening the Ark on that remote island in the Pacific, and the angels of death, drifting out of the ark and visiting hellfire upon all who dare to cast their eyes upon this the sacred object. Although the selection will be anything but sacred. It is anything but sacred. It's the very opposite of sacred. It's infernal. It's from the pits of hell. It's from the bowels of the underworld. But just like with the opening of the ark in that scene, just like with what they say about the sun, that you're not supposed to look directly at it, or you'll go blind because the light's too bright. The brilliancy of direct sunlight into your iris is going to fry your irises and make it so that you cannot see anymore. In the same way, what I suggest doing with regard to this stupid election, and I'm quoting from the movie Election. Who cares about this stupid election? I cannot avoid my cinephile proclivities. So, sorry, not sorry. What I advise is don't look at it. Don't get drawn into it. And it's a lot harder it's much harder it's easier said than done in 2024 when the internet is everywhere, when you carry around the internet with you in your phone, and the desire to, the curiosity factor always asserts itself, and you just have to, if you're standing in line at the gas station, to buy some potato chips or whatever, and there's a couple people in front of you, then of course you get out your phone and just browse through stuff. So it's harder to avoid. I will give you that. It's harder to avoid what's going on, especially when it's this ritual that has been magnified by the powers that be to be the mega ritual. In other words, voting is a sacrament in in the demonic establishment's pseudo-religion, in the religion of the state, of the modern state. To vote is to participate in a life-giving sacrament. And it's just going to be crazy. It's going to be off the charts. It's going to be something that, you'll feel tempted to want to know what's going on. And then once you get a little bit clued into what's going on, you'll want to know more. And then you'll want to know more. And then before you know it, you'll be frothing at the mouth. It'll happen. It's like rabies. And I only thought of this just now. It's like a spiritual rabies where you get bitten and you but in this case, of course, you choose to get bitten, right? Because you can choose just not to look at it. And if you don't look at it, then you won't you won't get bitten. Whereas somebody just walking around in the forest encounters a rabid creature, and you might just get bitten just through no fault of his own. In this case, if you get bitten, you're to blame. Now, of course, it's hard because other people will be buzzing about things. Other people will be talking about things, and places that you go that you think will be safe from these kinds of discussions will not be safe. They will be they will be sinkholes into hell. I know the dramatic hyperbole is tiresome, because it mirrors the kind of hyperbole that you hear during a presidential election, and especially the kind of hyperbole that you hear in a presidential election now. I think it used to not be this bad, but then we used to not be so thoroughly polarized, and the hate was not as strong as it is now. The hate which accompanies this extreme polarization, this extreme polarized state of being of the polity, of the citizenry. This white-hot hate, and I'm going to refrain from putting the blame anywhere right now for this white-hot hate. I don't think the blame is equally shared for the way things got to be right now. I don't think it's equally shared by everyone, by both sides of the ideological divide. But I'm not going to get into that right now, because this isn't talking about blame. I mean, I think it's important to assign blame where necessary, where you see it. It's part of ferreting out the truth. But in a sense, when you're talking about preserving your mental state, then in a sense asking who's to blame is almost a moot point, because whoever is to blame, we've still got this condition. We've still got the way things are, and the only way out is not ever to go in. And now is the time to begin disengaging. It's barely started. It's started, but it's only barely started. And now is the time to withdraw your eyes and the rest of your senses. Find things that will occupy your attention, things that are interesting to you, which have no relation, which have nothing to do with, or not that they have nothing to do with, but that won't lead you down the path to contemplating the present catastrophe that is presidential election 2024 in America. And that you might have to take radical steps in order to do that. You might have to, radically limit what you take in on the internet. You don't have to get off the internet, I don't think. You just don't go places that are that will bring you into this this infernal quagmire um, of the election. This is important. This is so important, and like I'm rolling my eyes when I say this is so important. This is so important because I know I'm echoing the tone of the people who want you to get involved and invested in the election. They always say that. They always say this is so important. This is so important. This is so important. There will never be a more important election in your life. That's what they said last time. And that's what they said the time before that, and the time before that, and the time before that. They always say that. They always say that. Don't let it sway you. The people who use that kind of rhetoric, the most important election ever, it's always the most important election ever. I mean, but the truth is, even if everything was fair, which of course we know it isn't, but even if everything was fair, even if they counted the votes fairly, etc. and so on, your vote, if you were to cast it, would not make a difference. Does not make a difference in a presidential election. It does not. Now, you can still choose to vote if you want. I'm not telling anyone to vote or not to vote. Vote if you must. I've voted in the past, mostly out of superstition. I had this superstition going because the times when I voted in the presidential election for the lesser of the two evils, or what I assess to be the lesser of the two evils, for the times that I did it, I was batting 1,000 until 2020. So 2020 broke my, I saw after 2020 that I didn't have the magic, and it was more just sort of a fun little thing. Like I said, a superstition. The same reason why you see a pitcher, in baseball, skip over the baseline when he's running to the dugout after an inning is over, or do this or that, the other thing. Athletes are notoriously superstitious. That they have to have their lucky cap, their lucky, they have to bounce the ball a certain number of times. All those kinds of things, all those OCD kinds of things. I was disabused of that. I was disabused of the notion that my vote, made a difference in the sense that whenever I voted before, it was the person I voted for always won. In the times when I voted, but didn't happen in 2020. So your vote doesn't matter, but we all know that the people who decide who wins are above our pay grade. Okay, we know that. If we're not a fool, we know that. Is it cynical to say this? I don't know. I think it's real. I think it's absolutely justified to make that observation. And I do it without shame. So, don't look at it. Listen to Indiana Jones. Listen to his counsel. He was right. Don't look at it. The second recommendation, is to read my new book. Now, my book, it's still, it has been completed. I still don't exactly know. I have hopes for its publication, but I don't exactly know at this point what form its publication will take. I know it will be published in some form or other, but I don't know exactly all the details of that. But my book is entitled The Rule of Wrath. The Rule of Wrath. Badass title, right? I had to pause because I'd forgotten what the title was. but I remembered. The Rule of Wrath is coming out soon. The Rule of Wrath is my sequel to Muse, which was the last book that I published. In Muse, those of you who read it, there were several characters, several storylines that lent themselves to a sequel. There were stories that had been left unfinished, or that had where we hadn't been told everything that there was to be told about these characters and where they would end up and what would happen to them. And so for the first time in my life, I wrote a sequel, and that sequel is titled The Rule of Wrath. The Rule of Wrath is about a lot of things, but one of the things that happens in it is it takes place during an election year, during a presidential election, which will be the last presidential election ever. After this presidential election, there will be no more presidential elections. It's set in the near future, and it's set in a society where, it's set in our own society. It's set in America, but in the America of a future where things have unraveled to even a greater extent than they already have, and so there's an election afoot, and there's a new young, fresh-faced candidate who has a mass populist appeal. Although he may have sinister roots, but he also may have good intentions. So he's a sort of Antichrist figure, if the Antichrist were maybe not so bad, which I know. I know how that sounds, but it's how the story unfolded. I'm just telling, and I just wrote it as it was revealed to me. So my second piece of advice will be to read my book, The Rule of Wrath, because if anything were needed to supply a balm in Gilead, a way to escape into fiction, but to escape into a kind of fiction in which we see a mirror held to the current electoral process and all of the accompanying corruptions, and everything that can happen. But with a new kind of candidate, if you like, somewhat of a somewhat of a 1933 style candidate. uh, I only bring that up just because history is cyclical. And those who don't, don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. Blah blah blah. I don't know. I mean, we have control over what we can control, and some things are out of our control. We do what we can to bring good into this world in which the principalities, powers, thrones, and dominions are almost exclusively evil. But this is a novel about Weimerica coming to an end. The end of Weimerica. If Weimar Germany ended in 1933, my novel, The Rule of Wrath, is about the end of Weimerica, the year that Weimerica finally comes to a much-needed close, and a new age begins. So that's my two-pronged advice about how to deal with this upcoming election and news, and the news cycle, and the hysteria, and the hyperbole, and the sanctimony, and just what will be almost an inescapable, if you let yourself get dragged into it, just this inescapable sense of horror and dread and despair. And that's what they want us to feel. They want us to know how weak we are. They want us to feel ourselves as weak. They want us to care very strongly about something that they know we don't have the capacity to change with something so silly as a vote. Superstition aside. But demanding that you care, that you give so much of your psychic vitality to this event that you have no control over, that's a recipe for bad mental health. So listen to Dr. Andy and follow my two-pronged advice. Number one, don't look at it, Marion. Number two, and again, this is the self-interested side of my advice, but still, I think it will help you. Read my book, The Rule of Wrath. I don't know yet about when it will be available, but this is my way of announcing it. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts if you have any. Talk to y'all soon.